Welcome to That Entrepreneur Life, a podcast about entrepreneurship that takes you from idea to launch and beyond. Each week, your hosts, Andrew Lees and Clint McPherson, discuss different business topics aimed at adding value to any entrepreneur's journey.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of That Entrepreneur Life. I'm Andrew Lees, and today I'm flying solo without Clint. I'm super excited to kick this thing off by welcoming our special guest, Scott Anderson, to the show. How's it going, Scott?
Great. Thanks, Andrew. Glad to be here.
Yeah, great to have you here. Before we get into everything, can you just tell our audience who you are and what you're all about?
Sure. I'm Scott Anderson, and my company is called 𝘍𝘍𝘐, and I'm a entrepreneur coach and also a licensed mental health therapist, which comes in handy sometimes.
Awesome. Yeah, that's an interesting background. And so, as a formal mental health therapist and now a seasoned business coach, can you take me back to when your entrepreneurial journey started, and what is it about entrepreneurship that led you to where you are today?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's partially in the genes. My grandfather and my father were both entrepreneurs, and in fact, at one point, I was involved in a business that my grandfather started. But from my earliest memory, I was always doing something that was entrepreneurial. My first business was a shoe shine business around the neighborhood, and I would just take my father's shoe shine kit and go door to door to my father's friends, basically, and see if they wanted me to shine their shoes. Okay. Turns out it's harder than it looks.
Yeah.
I'm not a good shoe shiner.
Yeah, you can't just scuff them up or run a handkerchief over it and call it a day, right?
No. It turns out the people are really particular about their shoes, and yeah. So that was sort of a trial by fire.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think just every business is, right. You get into
absolutely.
You get into things thinking, oh, this is going to be easy, or this part of it's going to be easy. Yeah. And this other part's going to be hard. And sometimes it is that way. But a lot of times there's unexpected things are harder than they actually seem. And sometimes sometimes the things you think are going to be hard are like, that wasn't too bad. We were able to work through that easily. But it's really interesting what challenges come up as you get into things.
Yes. Well, it's always something. As one of my business partners said, I've run 9 companies so far, and I've closed 2, sold 5, and kept 2. And one of my business partners told me, if it weren't for the money and the pressure and the people, this would be a hell of a business. And that's really sums it up. Yeah, it's always something.
Yeah, exactly. It really is. And it seems like, I go through this where I think, I get excited about my business, and then something comes up and I'm like, I get really stressed out, and I think, all right, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better business. There's got to be something else that I should be doing instead. Yeah. And that's kind of a dangerous trap, because sometimes, there's definitely businesses that are easier than others in general. But I think every business has its pros and cons, right? And somebody told me this a while ago, but there's no silver bullet. And
there's no perfect business. That's for
right.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's really true. One of the reasons, I mentioned my mental health background training. When I was running my first businesses, it was really hard on my mental health, because part of what I was, like all entrepreneurs, I think we're all wired to try to find the next best thing. And that can be really fatal if we find the next best thing and we don't stay focused where we are. Yep. It's really hard to stay where your hands are sometimes as an entrepreneur. And yet by distracting ourselves, and that's really the number one problem I think I found in the entrepreneurs that I coach and in my own background is distracting myself, either with worry about the future or there's another business that's better than this one.
Yeah.
And digging I like to say, digging a lot of shallow holes, but never digging one that's deep enough to mean something. That's what I find a lot, is that entrepreneurs tend to fracture their time so much that nothing has any impact. They're busier than hell. They're working a lot of hours, but they're not having any impact.
I mean, I think we can all relate to that. And that's something that, I mean, I have struggled with, but getting some focus, and then consistency, I think is so important.
Absolutely.
So how have you been in your business? How have you been able to, especially because you're a consulting business, I own a consulting business as well. Uh-huh. And I think it can be really challenging to focus on your clients and on the future at the same time. How are you able to juggle those two things?
Well, boy, that's a really great point. I mean, I'm a big believer in goal shedding versus goal setting. What most entrepreneurs, and what I tend to do, especially this time of year in January, is to pile on 20 more things I'm going to do.
Right.
And really what I found, both for me and my clients, is that there's tremendous power in addition by subtraction. The fewer things I'm focused on, the better I will do. And they can't all be the most important thing. There's a great book by a guy named Gary Keller called The One Thing. Okay. And basically what he argues is that at any one moment in time, whether we're talking about a day, an hour, a minute, or a quarter, or 6 months, there's always one thing that's most important for the entrepreneur to do. There are always, as Buddha said, there will always be 10,000 things, but of those 10,000 things, one of those is going to have the most impact if we focus on it. And so that's sort of a filter I try to put myself through and my clients through. I mean, we can do anything we want in this minute, and we can rationalize that they're all very important. But the truth is, one of those things will have the most impact, will knock down the most other dominoes if we focus on it. And on the one hand, on the other hand, it really is important to shed the things that won't have that kind of impact. They may be things we like to do or things we think are important, but if they don't have that impact, we have to shed them, because there's only one of us, in small entrepreneurial businesses.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the things that, at least for me, that keeps me maybe from focusing on fewer things is worrying that those things aren't the right things, right? Exactly. Like not being sure. And exactly. And I think that's scary. It's kind of like this, sometimes in entrepreneurship, there's this mentality of just, throwing crap against the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yes, exactly.
I've seen that I've talked to some entrepreneurs who they are 1,000 miles an hour, and they're talking about, starting these different startups real quick, making some money, moving on, they're doing so many things. And I just think, man, I could sustain that for a day, a week, maybe. You get really excited about something, and you feel like you can do 1,000 things, and maybe you can for like a little bit of time, but it's impossible to keep that up and to keep the consistency up. And I've really, over the last couple of years, especially this year, I've realized how important consistency is, and how much it really pays off, including with this podcast. I mean, Clint and I started this last January. So it's just about a year old, and we were talking about it for a few months, and what are we going to do? What are we going to talk about? And we weren't really sure, we wanted to get it just right. And finally we just hit record, and like just started talking. Yeah.
Yeah. Hit record. Yeah. That's a great one.
Yeah. And just hitting record, but then also being consistent and holding ourselves accountable week in and week out, making sure that we have at least one episode per week to get out there. I think is super, super important, so that when you look back, in a couple of years, hopefully we look back and we're like, because of that consistency, we were able to, help more people. We were able to reach more people. And so I think that's really important. And at some point you just have to have faith and just dive in, and then eventually you'll, if you're doing the right things, which you just have to, it's part research and understanding, like, generally what are the right things to do. And even if they're not perfect, sticking with it. And then once you have that, once you reach that point where you're like, okay, I got results from that. Now I have faith. So you reach some kind of like faith event
that's right. But that, you said it all there. I mean, in working with entrepreneur clients, and I have my own coach, obviously, but working with my own clients, what I find is that we're all prey to that doubt, and maybe entrepreneurs in a way have more doubt than other people. Or in some respects, we have no doubt, but often doubt creeps in. And then what happens? So if we don't get, and we're also incredibly impatient. So if we don't get results quickly, then we think, because we're so creative, we can think of 10 other things to do instead.
Oh yeah.
But what I found is the most, it's like, it sounds like theory if I'm talking to a client about it. But it becomes real very fast when they look at their sales. I just say, look at your sales. How are your sales? I mean, to choose one KPI, let's look at your sales. Where are you at? And 9 times out of 10, when I'm talking to my clients, one of the things they're most deeply frustrated about is plateaued sales. And the cause of plateaued sales, in my experience, is 9 times out of 10, it's not focusing on one thing, and it's squandering your efforts across, a mile wide and an inch deep. And that tends to get my client's attention, and mine also, in a way that nothing else will. I don't have to believe in it theoretically. I can just look at my sales. If they're plateaued, for example, or if any other metric in my business is plateaued, then I'm wondering why it's plateaued. Almost always it's because I'm squandering my efforts across a very broad spectrum, and I'm not doing the things that are going to make an impact. So and fortunately, that does get entrepreneurs, even the most distractible entrepreneurs, attention. But when you see that, I think probably sales plateaus is one of the most painful, frustrating, things that I deal with my clients. But there are other things as well. The business never changing. For example, never getting out of the weeds as an entrepreneur, being always wearing 10 hats instead of 2 or 1. Those two things seem to drive behavior more than any other single thing. And it's only then, and I know this myself as an entrepreneur, it's only then that I'm willing to consider, I've got to focus on, I've got to run 2 plays really, really well. I'm from Nebraska, and in the heyday of Nebraska football, what they did was run offensive plays that were not very creative, but they would run a back through the 1 hole and a back through the 3 hole over and over and over and over and over and over. Yeah. But they got really, really good at that. They weren't, particularly a passing attack or anything else. And in fact, in most cases, the defense knew what was coming, but they had practiced those plays, and they had become so consistent. And they had all of the micro skills so perfectly honed that they were unstoppable with those very, very simple plays. And they just ran them. My mother, who was not a football fan, could predict what the next play was going to be with great accuracy. Yeah. But they were still unstoppable. And I think that's a great model for us as entrepreneurs is, there's a coach who I really like named Taki Moore from Australia. And I think he's quoting somebody when he talks about this, but he calls it the 5 1s. And the idea is to run one strategy at one audience using one tactical system or one campaign for 1 year. And to get it right, and that's the thing we deprive ourselves so often, is getting those micro skills absolutely perfect. We never get a chance really to take ourselves from an idea to a enhanced and refined idea to a perfected idea. We never give ourselves the chance to do that. And then we think, well, the idea was no good. But usually it's the refinement of it. It's the consistency, as you say. It's the practice. Yeah. And that's why I love that 5 1s idea. And that's what I find most entrepreneurs, if they get in their own way, that's why they do it, is they get impatient too soon. They don't allow themselves to develop the micro skills. And And if they had really if you can get to the point where you're executing at that level, almost any strategy will work. It's not like we have to wait for the for the genius idea. If we can execute things perfectly, things will go well.
Right. So even a decent idea can have a huge impact. Like you said, with those, with the football analogy, a couple of plays that are super basic. If you perfect them and you're better and you're the best at those plays, even if people see them coming, they might not be able to stop it. I think that's really interesting. And I think it's really interesting what you said about not letting our ideas or ourselves perfect our ideas and get them to the point where we give them a chance to be perfected, because everybody has, not just entrepreneurs, but everybody's got great ideas, and you kind of get excited about them, especially as an entrepreneur. I think I'll have an idea and I'll think, I can't wait to implement that, and then maybe 6 months later, I haven't really implemented that yet. I haven't really done it yet.
Exactly.
Because I've been doing a million other things. So, and I think it's also interesting, and I've thought about this recently too, is the less we do, the easier life is too.
Oh, totally.
I mean, because you have fewer things to do, and the better you get at the few things that you are doing, the less you have to, the more it becomes kind of robotic, to where it doesn't take as much effort. It doesn't take as much thought, because it becomes more efficient. And so sometimes maybe we're, like I was talking about this with somebody recently, as an employee, really monotonous things that you do well over and over and over and over again are painfully boring. You kind of hate that as an employee. But you're also not concerned about growing the business. You have your paycheck coming in. You're not worried about that kind of thing. And as business owners, the boring, the monotonous things that we can do well over and over and over again are amazing. Like, those are the things that are super helpful to a business.
Exactly. It snowballs, it really does. I mean, one of the things happens that's most important, of course, is we get results for our customers.
Mm-hmm.
Bottom line, that's the only reason that we should be doing any of this. And that's the main thing that comes from perfecting one direction, one strategy, one, marketing plan, whatever. Is that at the end of the day, we ultimately get the opportunity, and also one delivery method. That's another kind of one of the 5 ones, so that we get perfect at fulfilling our clients' needs. I mean, that's really, of course, the acid test. Yeah. And instead of trying 10 different approaches, let's perfect the approach we're using. And that becomes, and ultimately, if we do perfect it, we may find it, as entrepreneurs, we may find it monotonous. But our clients won't. Our customers will be extremely happy that we consistently knock out great results every time. And ultimately that leads for entrepreneurs to opportunities to scale. And so you can train people to do what you're doing, but until you perfect it, and until it, but that's the thing I found so often when I talk to entrepreneurs and they say, well, I've tried so many things and nothing's worked. When you push down on that, when you dig down and ask, well, what did you do? What they really did was come up with an idea, try it for a week, get distracted. And so it didn't fail. It never had the opportunity to fail.
Yeah.
And psychologically, then we start thinking, oh my God, I'm trying all these things and they're all failing. None of them are failing. None of them had even the hope of failing.
Yeah,
never saw the light of day, really.
Yeah. And that's kind of, that's encouraging, I think, for people to realize maybe, that their ideas aren't necessarily failing. They just need to give a couple of them an actual chance of being successful.
Right. And it's the execution, right, where entrepreneurs tend to run out of energy. Mm-hmm. Once it starts to become even hinting at the monotony of doing something more than once in a row, entrepreneurs often quickly lose interest. But that's where the action is, and that's where the gold is too.
Right. Exactly. And having something that you can rely on, day in and day out, that people find useful and helpful, and they're willing to pay you for it. I mean, exactly. I think it's important if it ever gets monotonous for people. I don't think that's a bad thing. And I think unless the bottom line isn't,
Right.
accelerating. And so I think that's at the end of the day, you look at your bottom line, and I could do a lot of monotonous if it's, if it's growing
Right.
the business. I mean,
Absolutely.
you can put up with a lot of that. Yep.
Yeah. But there's that doubt factor and that belief, as you said, there's a threshold where you see, wow, I'm getting some traction here. This really is working. But we owe ourselves, I think, the opportunity to run the experiment completely and to see whether it can work or not.
Yeah.
And a funny thing about getting things perfected is that you've probably heard of the principle or the concept of imposter syndrome.
Yep.
I work with a lot of clients who do perfect what they do, and it becomes a bit monotonous to them. To their customers, it's gold. It's wonderful, right?
Yeah.
I have a financial advisor client, for example, who is incredibly masterful, and especially to a niche of clients that he serves that I think are mainly like widowed women, maybe. Anyway, and so for him, this thing is so easy. He can see the solutions a mile away because he's been running the same plays over and over and over again and getting better and better and better results. But to him, it feels so easy. He feels like maybe I'm conning these people because inside feels like, it feels like a monkey could do this. But of course, it's a monkey who has repeated a hard exercise for years and years. That's why it's easy, not because it's easy, but because he's worked so hard at it. And but you're right? I mean, that's the point where you really your business starts to scale, your reputation starts to grow, becomes more and more and more and more efficient. Yep. And that's typically the point where a lot of entrepreneurs say, "I'm out. I'm bored."
Yeah, on to the next thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think it makes sense to do that if you have some, big exit or something,
exactly.
and then you're really bored and you're really bored with some cash in the bank and you're looking for something else. That's okay. But otherwise it makes sense to just stick with it.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So you brought up imposter syndrome, which I definitely wanted to dig into with you. So, and it's interesting what you said about that, because I think about imposter syndrome is not feeling proficient enough at something. And I think about it maybe in the beginning of like when you want to start a business and you don't know everything about the industry that you're getting into, the market, you just don't know as much about it as other people might. And you think, wow, maybe I can't really do this. Maybe I can't hang with all these other people who seem to know more than me. Right. But what you're also saying is that it's not just that, it's that we're so proficient, yes. You can be so proficient at something that you think that it's obvious to everybody. So I think that's really interesting.
Exactly right. And so then and a lot of my clients have that experience where they think, I must be pulling something over on these people. I must be conning them in some way because I'm getting paid huge money to execute something like that I know in my sleep how to do. And because it's so easy for me now, then it must be bullshit. It must be a con of some kind. Yeah. And, it's really funny. And again, it's so much entrepreneurs spend so much time alone, either in their heads or genuinely alone. Yeah. That this is why I find that a coach can be really useful, is just to say, hey, to point out what's obvious and to give an objective viewpoint of the reality. It can definitely go either way. But one of them is, I know this so well, and I'm doing this in my sleep, and they're paying me huge money. It feels like I'm taking advantage of them. But the fact is that they're doing it in their sleep now because they've perfected it, or because they are exceptionally talented, or usually both. Mm-hmm. And so it's easy for you, but it would be impossible for your clients to do it. Yeah. You're right. But you're right. There's two sides to it. In the early days, the problem is, there are a lot of people who've been doing this longer than I have. I don't think I have the guns that I'm portraying myself in a way that is fraudulent. Yeah. And entrepreneurs seem to be, at least a lot of entrepreneurs I know, are sensitive to this sort of fraud factor. do I know what I'm talking about? Can I get people to where they want to go?
Yeah.
And the other part is that entrepreneurs are always a little bit ahead of their skis. They're always anticipating the next thing.
Yeah.
And they're kind of in I think a positive way, making things up as they go along. Which isn't necessarily fraudulent or bad or anything else. But what it means is they're creating in real time. And it feels like we're both discovering this, at the same time.
Yeah.
So clearly we have to prove these things out with real clients and demonstrate that they work. But there's a tendency, because entrepreneurs are moving so fast and are trying to stay at that real time edge of their skis, that it can feel fraudulent when in fact it isn't.
Well, I've watched some videos about certain topics. I'm trying to learn something, and they're talking about what they know, and their experiences from not just success but also from failure. And they're also saying sometimes, hey, I'm learning this too. Like, I've made mistakes. Because you're teaching somebody else doesn't mean that you have to know everything about it. Right.
Exactly.
But I think if you're pushing yourself to learn more and to stay ahead of it, then you can, if you learn something that you can teach your clients, that's super valuable. If you learn something today, you were charging people yesterday for for your service, but if you learn something new today, that just adds to the value, but it doesn't make it like, how could you have sold your service without not actually knowing every single thing about it? So I think it's cool when people are open about that, when they say, I don't know everything, but we're sort of all in this together. They're not necessarily saying this, but it's implied that they're ahead of you, of where you are, because they're trying to teach you. And that's all you have to be, is basically one step ahead. And then you have something then to share with other people. So
it's also true that entrepreneurs tend to discount what they know, just generally. They figure, if I know it, everybody must know it.
Yep.
And
I do that all the time.
There's a great, I wrote a blog about this recently. And if you can imagine a graph that on the x-axis says how much you think you know, and then on the y-axis is how much you actually know. And what happens for a lot of entrepreneurs is that they think that they know much less than they actually know. And, or they discount what they know as being something that everybody knows. And, clearly we have to be careful not to, we have to be careful not to bullshit ourselves. And there is definitely a danger in thinking we know more than we know. This is why I found that a coach can be very useful to kind of help you objectify that.
Oh, definitely. Yep.
But in most cases, what I find is that entrepreneurs tend to discount what they know, or presume that everybody knows the same thing.
Yep.
And the reality is, in my experience, 9 times out of 10 or 95 times out of 100, the area of knowledge that I know about is something my clients don't know, and I can help them there at a minimum. I can definitely help them there.
Yeah. So do you think it's imposter syndrome is that a feeling that ever goes away completely? Or do we, because we're continually pushing the boundaries, the envelope of, we're always trying to get to the next level. Do you think that once we get to that next level, we start, that feeling sinks in again?
Yeah. I've got a program that I run for my clients about imposter syndrome. And I think you put your finger on it. Because entrepreneurs are the way they are, they're ambitious in not only financially, but mainly in terms of learning new things. And new things are inherently very attractive to entrepreneurs. And so they keep introducing, I think, a very powerful and useful amount of stretching, towards learning new things, perfecting new things. But it also introduces a certain amount of doubt, because you're always, again, on the edge of your skis. You're always, you're always pushing. So we tend to create our own imposter syndrome feelings by being people that are always stretching for new things, to learn new things and to achieve new things. So, for entrepreneurs, I think it is or it can be kind of a chronic problem, but there's a lot of things that, that you can do about it. And, mainly the main thing with imposter syndrome is just being in your head too much. I found, and not being where your hands are.
Yeah.
The only place where imposter syndrome really exists is between your ears, right? When you're, and you're in that moment of existential doubt about, am I making this up? Is this bullshit, or do I know what I'm talking? But I mean, other than that, it doesn't have any reality. The best solution, I think, for imposter syndrome is get busy helping somebody, and test it. Can you help them or not?
Yeah. And get feedback, right? I mean,
exactly.
See if they're saying it's helpful, if enough people say that what you're doing, your product or your service is helping them, then you've got something, right?
That's it. Exactly. If you can help people move away from their pain or towards their goal faster and farther and cheaper than they could on their own, then they'll throw money. And there's no more sincere validation of what you're doing. No one's going to part with money if you can't actually do it, if you can't make fire.
Yeah.
But I think, so part of it is I think for entrepreneurs to recognize that this is kind of the cost of being an entrepreneur who's always hungry for new ideas and new approaches, is that we'll always be at least at risk of being on the edge of what we know and what we don't know.
Yeah.
That's just kind of who we are. And that there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that you're an imposter. It means that you're an entrepreneur. The second piece of it is just to get out of your head and into your life, and as you say, get feedback, test it out, see for yourself, but you can't really learn anything in the echo chamber between your ears.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. And it's good to have, I think it keeps us in check, to some point. I think you definitely have to get out of your head and just, keep pushing forward and realize, as long as you are actually helping people, acknowledge that and have confidence, but at the same time, it keeps us in check, right? Because if we didn't have any of that, then we'd just be putting whatever out there into the world with no regard for what it does, who it helps or who it hurts. So
yeah, it's a balance, I mean, I think for all of us as entrepreneurs, there's the balance between being stagnant and being actively engaged. And, so there'll always be that tension. But you're right. Yeah. If we feel a pang of, wow, is this real or not? That's good. That's a good tension to have.
Yeah. It's human.
Yeah. And it protects us from hurting our customers or being fraudulent, right? Is that governor that says, wow, what if this isn't, real?
Right.
So we have to get into the market, get our hands dirty, help people.
And figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, Scott, through your entrepreneurial journey from the highest to the lows, what has been the most difficult thing about being an entrepreneur, do you think? There
have been a lot of big challenges. I think the hardest part for me, the last business that I owned and sold was an advertising agency, which I ran for a long time and ran long enough to go through several economic cycles. And one of the things that, when I started out in the advertising business, the concept of remote teams, freelancers was a very common idea, but remote teams and decentralized management and so forth wasn't really a thing.
Yeah.
And so I went through a number of cycles of having to lay people off, along with all of my competitors during down cycles like the .com bubble when it burst, various recessions, and certainly 2008. And that was just incredibly painful for me to go through. There was no alternative, not for me, not for my competitors, not for lots of other businesses, but it was still extremely painful. And I think that's an important thing. If you have people on your payroll, or even if they're not full-time employees, but you have people that are part of your team.
Pending, yeah.
It's difficult and I think it's probably not human to feel something.
Right.
That was the most, one of the most difficult things. that I've ever been through. And I hope I never get to the point where I'm sort of so cynical or so used to it or something that becomes
right.
I mean, thankfully I haven't had to lay off anyone in a long time. And, but that was really painful. That was really hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. Do you think have you, from those experiences, were you able to, is there anything you do differently now that maybe helps to keep people around? Or are you able to, now that more people are working remotely and virtually, you don't necessarily have to have as many people on full-time payroll? What have you learned from those experiences?
Well, part of what we did, and this was the advertising agency business, was that, we had at a high, like 50 or so employees, and, and to the point where I was spending most of my time working on management and people issues, which was not what I wanted to do. Actually, it just sort of was a Frankenstein that I created. Yeah. But so definitely after that happened in 2008, I think almost everyone in our business went to a decentralized, remote, leveraged model, to keep a minimum of full-time employees only in key client-facing roles and strategy-based roles. So I think we all made that switch. But the main thing, and unfortunately, the advertising world is kind of can be a rags to riches business when you win a new client or lose a new client. But, the answer to so many things, I think, is to have a business development system that is automated to the greatest extent possible, that's generating leads, scheduling discovery appointments and closing sales more or less automatically, as a hedge against, losing clients that inevitably happens, is to have a business development or new business system that's really robust and really works. That's what I spend most of my time on, for me and for my clients now, is to ensure that there's a consistent, dependable flow, not just of leads, but that people are drawn through the entire sales cycle in a reliable way.
Yeah. And that's important for you and also for the people who work for you, right? I mean, that keeps everything consistent. For everybody. And yeah. So what do you think if you had to focus on one business development mechanism or system, what would that be? Or what is that maybe for you?
The most important thing that I think that we do, so let's assume for the moment you're getting enough leads. I guess the first thing is to set goals in a mathematical way, to really understand, look, our business needs to do X, or we want it to do X this year. And to really go through the funnel in a very scrupulous way and understand, what it will take at every stage of the sales cycle in order for us to end up with X in terms of clients and sales. And what most entrepreneurs I found tend to do is to not go through that exercise and not realize that you might have to have a database of 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 in order to net what you want to do at the end of the day with respect to new business and new clients, et cetera. So new customers. So that's number one, is to really take dead aim on the numbers you have to hit. And then the second thing is that can be almost as bad is, I say to my clients that there's the only thing worse than no customers is bad customers, and nothing will eat your business alive faster than bad clients. So you're better off really with none than bad ones, because they'll kill your culture, they'll kill morale, they'll drive your team away, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And you'll lose money on top of it. So
yeah, I've experienced some of that for sure. Right.
So one of the most important things is to have, one of the reasons for having this dependable lead flow is so that you can say no, to really scrutinize clients and to audition them more than they're auditioning you, to understand from the very beginning, is this a fit or not a fit, one way or the other. Taki Moore, I mentioned earlier, has a great process for this. But basically what it comes down to is that you need to understand from the very beginning, are we a fit, at least a fit enough to have another conversation? Or are we, looking at this completely wrong? In the design and marketing business, one of the questions that my clients tend not to ask is, what is your budget? It feels like uncomfortable to ask that question.
Yeah.
But if they don't have a budget, or if they say things to you like, well, we were hoping you could tell us what the budget should be. I always advise my entrepreneur clients to run away screaming from people who ask a question like that.
Yeah.
But if they don't have a budget, there's nothing to talk about, right?
Yeah.
This is sort of a basic go, no go part of the conversation.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with having that in a very overt, friendly way, but just to know for sure, are we a fit, at least as far as we can tell at this point? If not, let me refer you to somebody else.
Right.
To ask the question, is this a now thing or a later thing, is so important. I found a lot of my clients get distracted for, days and weeks with somebody for whom this is not going to happen this year. They're kicking tires.
Yeah.
So let's find out, is this a now thing or a later thing or a never thing from the very beginning? If it's a later thing, we can say, hey, let's talk later then.
Yeah. That's
let's
interesting.
Not waste time.
That's something I might start to implement into my business, actually, is just ask, because I don't do this, but I probably should, is this something that is this a project that you want to get going right away, then a few months, within a couple of years?
Exactly.
And also I should probably be asking about budget. Although for what I do, I have a product development consulting business. And so I try to not ask for a budget, because usually people are like, well, you tell me what it costs to do it, and then I'll tell you if that's okay.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes I could actually probably save a lot of time by saying, this is going to cost between $10,000 and $15,000, and they're like, oh, I thought it was going to cost $1,000, and we say, oh, we're way too far off. And if they say, well, I thought it was going to be like 8 or 9, it's like, all right, we're a little closer, so maybe it's worth going through the full process.
But better to have that conversation early on. One of the symptoms I found of clients who don't have a real customer development system, business development system, is that they don't ask that question, and they have so few. The sales cycle is so empty that if somebody does call or somebody does hit the website, they just fall all over these people and treat them like kings, and waste a lot of time trying to win this business, when in fact there may not be any business to win.
Exactly.
And it becomes hugely time consuming, and you can waste a lot of time doing some work for them on a speculative basis, and it all turns out to nothing. They have no money. This was speculative from the beginning. This isn't a real deal. Yeah. And that can really cripple entrepreneurs, is to sort of fall in love with what they think the deal is, because they have so little lead flow that they're desperate kind of, and they have to make something work. Yeah.
Exactly. And so getting fresh new leads in as consistently as possible is so important. What is the mechanism for getting new leads? If you don't mind sharing that with us, what do you do if you had to focus on one thing to get new leads? What are you doing? Is it content, outreach, paid ads? What do you do?
Well, for me, it's sort of a combination of things. We start with the website and with SEO, and the most important thing of all, of course, is to know specifically who you want to talk to, and specifically what you want to say in response to their specific pain. If we don't know that, then nothing good can happen.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that's really the most important ingredient, is to just to take dead aim at who are we talking to and what is their pain, and how will we solve it. If we don't have that, then we can advertise, in Google ads or Facebook or, whatever, but it won't ever amount to anything. So that's really the most important part. So for a lot of my clients are B2B companies. And so we do a lot of work with LinkedIn, and run campaigns in LinkedIn. Not paid campaigns, but messaging campaigns that are typically educational and of the give sort of variety, sharing information. But it's all about getting people to know you, like you, and trust you. And if we don't get there, then we can't have a conversation. But it's a cycle of building familiarity, building trust, building relationship, and then asking for miniature sales. The smaller, the better. The ones that we are the most likely people will say yes to. The mistake that a lot of our clients have made, at least sometimes, is asking to get married when actually you should be asking for their phone number.
Right.
And and to be overly ambitious and to skip steps so that their chances of success are tiny.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, we want to go for a sale where the chances of success are high. If we could if we can send a message to a client that says, "Hey, are you right now, is your biggest issue having more conversations with customers or closing sales? Where are you having the most challenge?"
Yeah.
If they say yes, then that's a mini sale. And, if they respond to that at all, it's a mini sale. But we need to start at the place where we have the most chance of succeeding, not at, instead of swinging for the fences, to at first just get in the batter's box.
Yeah. I think that's kind of a marketing, 101 thing where it seems obvious, but it really isn't. And there's like a lot of people have that knee-jerk reaction to swing for the fences, to go all in and say, "Hey, it's kind of this feeling of like, I'm busy, you're probably busy. Are you at all interested in doing business all the way with me?" Right. And when we really should just be asking those little questions, getting those mini sales and just working it up from there. Because at the end of the day, especially if you're reaching out to somebody completely cold, they have no idea who you are. They don't trust you, and they don't have any reason to trust you. So I think maybe even saying, "Hey, do you want to hop on a call? I'd love to do that." But without, like, I get messages on LinkedIn where it's just this long thing, like all this stuff with it's like a long form email basically in a LinkedIn message. And I'm just like, oh man, I don't have time to go through that. And it's asking too much too. So we have to think about what because we all respond, even if we're going for the kill for our own business, there's other people going for the kill with us. Yeah. And we may react differently. And if there's a mismatch there, then you have to reevaluate.
That's right. Well, it all boils down to risk and reward. And even if it's just the risk of wasting, 5 minutes of your time reading a long form email in a LinkedIn post or a LinkedIn message, that's a risk. And everybody has to kind of think, what is the reward of me reading this?
That's true.
Against the time I'm going to spend. Plus, I don't know them. I don't trust them, et cetera. So that's why, to reduce the risk as much as possible, I've got I think this is also talking more actually. It definitely is. He was talking about 9-word emails. Mm-hmm. And the idea is first of all, to just be sensitive to the fact that everybody's busy and they don't want to risk or invest a lot of their time with somebody they don't know. And there's no apparent benefit. So have the risk be as tiny as possible.
Yep.
Put out write a 9-word sentence with a question, a 9-word question.
Okay.
And, and see if there's any interest in talking about it, but reduce the risk and increase the reward as much as you possibly can.
Yeah.
Even if you can't increase the reward so much in the front end, at least reduce the risk. And that's the risk of a 500 page or 500 word message.
Yeah. Most people aren't reading that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a place for a long copy for sure, but that isn't it.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. Get somebody comfortable with you, get them wanting to do business with you. And have them ask you for more details. Then by all means, dig in and give them, explain to them what the details are and how you can actually help them. So that's interesting. It's tough because we are wired to just want to get stuff done.
Yeah.
When we want something, but when somebody else is doing the same thing to us, we feel attacked. And it's so crazy how we can be on different sides of the have different philosophies depending on whether we're asking for it or whether it's being asked of us. We can have two totally different philosophies about it.
Exactly. So, that's true.
Yeah,
that's really true. You asked earlier about a practical tip or technique, and I'll just throw this one out for what it's worth. So, if, and not everybody's in this situation, but, it's mid-January and you started the year with a head of steam and big goals and big ambitions and a positive outlook. But what I find is a lot of people get to mid-January and they're just kind of stuck. They find, for one thing, that they've probably over goaled themselves. Mm-hmm. But here's a technique that I found that I'm trying with a number of my clients who say, I'm just stuck. I just feel like I'm not making a difference. I'm not making an impact. And this is particularly for folks who find that their sales are flat or that they're not having the kind of success right now that they want to have, and feel themselves a little bit paralyzed. I've seen this happen again and again about this time of year where people feel like I started the year and what the hell. Anyway, so this is something that'll generate activity right away in terms of talking to potential customers. It's very low hanging fruit. It's very easy. It does require a little bit of consistency and discipline. And it's called I call this Jumpstart January, but the technique is just called Daily Dozen. And the idea is that you commit for a week, and this takes some discipline. You have to find the time. But commit for a week to reach out to 12 people a day who who are not cold calls at all. People that they're either past customers, current customers, they could be friends, contacts, anybody that might put you in a position to have a conversation around something that might generate new business for you and might generate a solution for them.
Okay.
And reach out to 12 of them a day for a week. I like to have people try this Daily Dozen for 2 weeks, but I've never seen anybody who can do it, because what almost always happens is that by day 5 or day 7, and sometimes sooner, that, if you sent out, it amounts to 60 messages or phone calls or texts or whatever, in a week's time, something happens. And it's a great way to kind of get yourself unstuck and get yourself back in the game, and to turn your head around from whatever's between your ears into the lives of other people. But this is just a great way to jumpstart January if you're stuck. This Daily Dozen concept. In fact, I've got when we're done, I'll send you a link to a video I just made. This is just a really practical, easy way to jumpstart January, jumpstart any kind of plateau you feel that you're in, especially in terms of sales. So I'll send it to you and you can tell me what you think.
That's awesome. Yeah, we can put that in the in the description here.
Great.
In the notes, so that our audience can check it out too. That's a great piece of advice, I think. And so you're saying that could be just complete strangers, like new potential leads, or existing customers?
I'd make it reach out to people who are your contacts, friends who seem appropriate to your business. Past customers is a great place to go.
Okay.
And usually what the email, and I can even send the email with the link that we recommend sending, is very straightforward. And it just says, I hope your year is off to a great start. I'm talking to, colleagues and other business people maybe, and trying to get a sense of what the year looks like to you. And I'm discovering some things that I'll share you that I'm hearing in these phone calls. But I'd just like to talk. I'd like to hear what you're seeing for the new year, what your main initiative is for the year, what your biggest opportunity and challenge is, basically. And it'll take 5 minutes, but I'd really love to do that. And really all you're trying to do is to kind of stir things up. If you get great ideas from them, great. If you hear when they're talking about their challenges, then maybe you can help, right?
Sure.
But at a minimum, after you make a couple of these calls, you can share what you're hearing and you can really add some value, to other people. But it's a contact sport, right? And so we need to, it's just a great way to get out of a kind of a stuck place that entrepreneurs sometimes get in.
Sure.
But it delivers genuine value, right? It delivers genuine. But what I've always found in this for myself and for my clients is that if you run this this daily dozen for a week, you're going to start getting some replies, and send it to prospective customers that for whatever reason haven't closed. Send it to past customers. Send it to business colleagues, and just see what happens. The idea is intentionally to focus at low-hanging fruit, people who already know you, people for whom you don't have to establish knowing, liking, and trusting, so that you can kind of cut to the chase.
You can dig in. They're more likely to respond with something,
exactly.
And they've got some trust with you already.
Exactly.
They feel comfortable with you.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Well, I think that's a great piece of advice. And I was going to ask you to wrap up the episode with one piece of advice. I think that's perfect. I think that's a great way to wrap it up. And it was, I think that's a wrap for this episode, from myself and, from Clint, who's not here, but here in spirit. Scott, we really want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us and adding value to what we're doing as entrepreneurs on this podcast.
Thanks, Andrew. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you all so much for listening to That Entrepreneur Life. To learn more about what Scott is working on, check out 𝑊𝑑𝑎REyou.us. If you like what you heard today, please subscribe to our podcast, and don't forget to download our free ebook at thatentrepreneurlife.com. Also, if you're interested in having us do some mini masterclass episodes this year, please contact us through our website. Thanks for continuing to support what we do as entrepreneurs, and don't forget to join us next week for another episode of That Entrepreneur Life.
Thanks for listening to That Entrepreneur Life podcast. Be sure to visit thatentrepreneurlife.com to join the conversation, access our show notes, and discover our fantastic bonus content. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode as we continue to add value. Until next time.